This is the Cricket Behavior and Preferences Lab. Crickets are terrestrial insects in a family that is related to the grasshoppers and katydids. The crickets used in these experiments is the house cricket. Female house crickets are identifiable by the ovipositor, which is this long stick at the back of the abdomen used for laying eggs. Males don't have this, but have specialized wings, shown here, that are used for songs to attract females and to defend against other males. Females are not able to create song. Territoriality was rated on a level of 1 to 5 for aggression. 1 being mild contact between two males, in which neither male retreats or shows dominance. Courting behavior was reported by a G for guarding and an F for following. In the first experiment, a male in his own terrarium acclimated there for a few days on his own. Had one male introduced, then a female introduced into the habitat, and finally a male and female together. The second experiment was the same, except a female was added first and then a male, and then the pair of male and female. In the first territory, the hypothesis was that the resident male would show aggression toward added males, and his aggression would grow over time, and also as females were added. Before adding any other crickets, he stayed motionless on top of the egg crate unless disturbed, and when disturbed he went back to sit on top of the egg crate. The results of the first experiment were not consistent with the hypothesis, with all points of the hypothesis, because in the first part, where the two males were together, there was contact, but it was mostly mild, without much dominance, except for one observation where the resident male was dominant, which refutes part of the hypothesis that says that the resident male would show aggression toward the first added male. When the female was added, aggression became slightly stronger, and also there was courting behavior seen by chirping in the males and following the females. In the last part of the experiment, there wasn't more aggression being shown, but there was one instance of following. So overall, the hypothesis was not supported because the resident male most of the time stayed still on top of the egg crate or engaged in mild contact with males and females. His aggression did not grow over time and only slightly grew when females were added. This video shows one interaction between the resident male on the side of the egg crate on the left and the guest male on the bottom of the terrarium. This was one especially aggressive contact, the only contact of its kind, and it wasn't even fighting. You can see both males are using their wings as a display without contact first, and then the resident male comes down to touch the other with his antenna. They touch slightly, but mostly use their wings to warn each other, and then both move on. In the second experiment, the hypothesis was that the resident male would try to court the first added female and would be more aggressive toward the first added male because the female was already in there. And the resident would get more aggressive as more crickets were added. Before any other crickets were added, the resident walked around the side of the crate bottom and stayed underneath the crate. But during the first scenario with the female, there was one instance of following, but not much more evidence recording than that. In the second part, the female actually followed the resident male. However, there was no courting being shown by the males and no aggression between the males. In the last part of the experiment, there was contact between males, but it was only mild. Therefore, overall, the hypothesis was not supported by the data because the resident male did not become more aggressive and court more females as time went on. So, overall, a lot of the crickets stayed under the egg crate motionless. There was some chirping as females were added, but it was mostly mild to no interaction. From these two experiments, it can be concluded that crickets are territorial, but they don't show aggression all of the time, or at least some individuals don't. And when there is aggression, usually fighting is not required, and males can warn each other with wing displays without having to combat. The resident males didn't win most of the fights. In fact, most of the interaction between males in these two experiments were mutual leaving and no retreats. I mean, sometimes the dominant male was the guest male too, so resident males are not always dominant. Females created a little more aggression in males, but this wasn't always consistently seen. The addition of females did present more chirping behavior, however, not always more guarding from other males, with some following. In the substrate experiment, a terrarium with four equal quadrants of sand, soil, rock, and cage bottom was constructed, and 3 females and 3 males separately were allowed to roam the substrates, first for an acclimation period of 2 minutes, and then for another 5 minutes while their time on each substrate was recorded. And the crickets were deposited in the middle of the substrate so that they could choose which one to go to first. 2 of the female crickets laid eggs during this time in the edge of the sand and the soil, which may indicate that females like a place where it's easy to insert the ovipositor and also where their eggs won't be easily crushed or found, as in a rock substrate. And the hypothesis for this experiment was that the male and female crickets would both stay on the soil the longest. The individual results didn't really support this, because for males the most time was spent on the cage bottom, and for females it was the tie between soil and sand. So there wasn't a clear lead by the soil. The evenness in soil and sand can probably be attributed to the time spent laying eggs in those 2 substrates by the females. For the class data, it's clearer that soil was the preferred substrate, especially by females, which may be due to scouting out for a good place to lay eggs. And then sand, rock, and cage bottom were preferred in that order based on the time spent there. In order to tell if there was really a difference between male and female preference for substrates, an analysis of variance was performed for both the individual and class data. And for both, the p-value was above 0.05, meaning that the null hypothesis was accepted, and there was no significant difference. There was most likely no significant difference in the amounts of time spent in different substrates based on gender.